Welcome! This time on WoodWorks, we'll make this graceful black walnut display stand with glass shelves, so please join us. Hi, I'm David Marks. Welcome to WoodWorks. This 6-foot display stand with its open frame and glass panel construction provides ample space and a 360-degree view of your treasures. Made from sturdy black walnut, the legs and frames complement the 5 glass shelves. The use of hidden joinery adds to the clean visual style, and the wenge caps provide an artful contrast and strength to the tall, graceful legs. We just milled up and cut our black walnut stock to rough dimensions, and we've sanded both the inside and outside surfaces. As you can see on our prototype, it'd be a lot more difficult to sand these inside surfaces after all these parts are glued up. This project can be divided into 2 sections. The legs, which are 72 inches tall, and the shelves, which are 21 inches square. We'll begin with the legs by cutting them slightly over 72 inches. The legs are formed by joining 2 pieces of black walnut, making an L shape, which is 2 1/4 inches wide on each outside face. Next, while we're at the table saw, we'll cut our frame stock. We need 20 pieces for the 5 shelves, each 21 inches long. We've already selected and matched the stock for our legs so that the color and the grain go together. Now we're getting ready to cut the dados that'll support our shelves. To do that, we've made a jig out of some 1/2-inch MDF, and we've already laid out the spacing for our shelves. Now the beauty of using this jig is that once we clamp our stock into position, referencing from the top, all of our dados will line up and our shelves will sit level. Our jig is set up to generate all the components for our legs. There's a left side and a right side, and also an allowance for cutting this through dado. Now, on these wider pieces, it's because we have a stop dado that we need a left and a right side. On these narrower pieces, this is where we'll be cutting the through dado. Now these narrower pieces will get glued to the wider pieces, forming a right angle. And it's this right angle where we're going to have this completely concealed dado that you won't see from the outside. Now we're going to use our router with a 1/2-inch carbide flush bearing bit to route out our dados. We've got our leg stock clamped into our jig. We've got the depth set on our router. So now we're ready to start cutting. The bearing rides along the MDF, guiding the bit, making a perfect dado to hold the shelves. All the pairs of our legs have dados in them, so now we're ready to glue them up. Since we're gluing up long grain to long grain, we don't need any joinery in these. And here's a tip. To make it easier to line the 2 parts of our legs, we've milled up some small pieces of MDF and we've inserted these into the dados. Now if your leg stock has a slight bow to it, that's not a problem. We can take that out in the glue up because we're gluing these together at right angles. We simply start at one end and glue these together flush, and then we work out the bow down towards the other end. When gluing all 4 legs together, make sure you apply the glue evenly and avoid having the glue drip into the dados. This will make the cleanup easier. Use plenty of clamps to get a uniform bond, and putting cork on the clamps will protect the wood. Also, adding clamps and forcing the wood into alignment will take out any bow in the wood. Now that the glue is dried on our legs, we're ready to cut these to length. Now because we referenced everything off of the top, we're going to be making our trim cuts off of the bottom. And that way it'll ensure that they all come out the same size. Now once we've got all these cut to length, we can start working on our shelves. Now we're ready to start making our shelves. Let's take a look at our prototype. Each shelf is going to be 21 inches square. We're going to have mitered corners, and we're going to reinforce each corner with a spline joint. Now the spline joint will be concealed by our legs. So we'll start by cutting a rabbet that will support our glass. We'll do that right here at the router table. We're going to batch cut the rabbet in all the frame pieces. The rabbet will be 3/8 of an inch wide by 1/4 of an inch deep. We'll cut it in 2 passes with a rabbet cutting bit. The first cut will make slightly undersized, and we'll finish the cut on the second pass. By making the cut in 2 passes, you minimize chip out. Now that we've finished cutting our rabbets, we're ready to cut our miters. We'll do that here at the table saw using the miter jig. Now we'll position our rabbet so it's facing the fence. And we'll cut one of our miters on the left-hand side of the jig, and then the other miter on the right-hand side of the jig, positioned up against the stop block. That'll make sure that all of our parts come out the same length. There will be 8 cuts, 2 cuts on each of the 4 sides on every frame. With 5 shelves to make, this is 40 miter cuts, so make sure your blade is sharp. As we said before, our shelves are going to have a spline miter joint. Now a miter joint is not a very strong connection, so it needs something to reinforce it. So we're going to make a cut in each corner and glue in one of these triangular splines. But before we do, we're going to glue these shelves together. Now some of you might ask, why not make those cuts first? Well, the reason is that by gluing this shelf together first, we'll ensure that these miters will have a strong, tight fit. We'll apply yellow glue and provide bonding pressure with a band clamp. To make the precise cuts at the frame for the splines, we've installed this cradle on the table saw. Now for the sake of safety, it's a good idea to make sure that everything is clamped in place securely. This will also ensure consistent and accurate cuts. It's important to use a blade that has a square tooth configuration. That way the corner slots we're cutting won't have any jagged edges. The blade is set to cut a slot about 1 1/4 inches into each corner. With all the slots milled in our frames, now it's time to make our splines. To do that, we use some black walnut stock that we've milled up earlier to about 1/8 of an inch. Then we cut the splines to size on the bandsaw. Adding the splines is simple. After brushing on some glue, we slide these into the slots, then clamp them securely. Once the frames are dry, we'll come back with a flush bearing bit and trim it so it's smooth and even with the rest of the frame. Now we'll just finish trimming up these corners with a block plane and a scraper, and then we can work on the wenge accents. The pieces are almost ready for final assembly. Now we'll make the wenge caps, which will accent the top and bottom of our legs. The rich dark color of the wenge will add interest and contrast to our finished display stand. We'll begin by cutting our wenge stock to size. Remember, wenge is a very hard wood, so use a good quality sharp carbide blade. As a design feature, we'll make the top caps slightly smaller than the bottom ones. The top pieces will be 3 inches square and 1/2 inch thick. The bottom pieces will be a bit larger,
at 3 1/4 inches square and 3/4 of an inch thick. The difference in size will add visual interest. At the router table, we shape our top and bottom caps using a 45-degree bevel bit. It's a good idea to use a fingerboard to hold the wenge in place. Since wenge is a hardwood, make the bevels in 2 passes to avoid chip out.
Now that we've finished shaping our wenge caps, let's add some shaping to our legs and to our shelves, which will soften the edges and add some dimension to our display stand.
Starting with the legs, at the router table, using a 1/4 inch bevel bit, we make our first bevel cut along the outside corners of our legs. Then, with a plunge router, in the same 1/4 inch bevel bit, we cut along the inside and outside edges. When we're finished, the legs will have nice beveled corners. Next, we use the router table to shape and soften both sides of our shelf frames with the 1/4 inch bevel bit. We stop short of the corners because these will attach to our legs.
Now we're ready to attach our wenge caps to our legs. We're going to use dowels for our joinery. And to make sure that all of our holes are drilled properly, we've made a wooden doweling jig. Now this can be used on both sides of our legs and on the top and the bottom. And by referencing off this inside corner, it'll ensure that all of our holes will line up accurately.
Now, we carefully drill the holes in our leg by sliding the jig in place, making sure it is clamped securely. A piece of masking tape on the bit is an easy way to make a depth gauge.
To make sure that our holes line up in our caps, we've made another wooden jig, which we'll use with these little metal pins called dowel centers.
The jig is made for both the top and bottom caps. For the smaller top piece, we use wedges and a shim to secure it into position. And you want to make sure that you pay attention to orient the grain patterns of the wenge so it's consistently in the same direction. Next, we place the dowel centers in the leg stock. Then we position the leg over the wenge using the jig as a guide. Dropping the leg will make the marks that we'll use to drill the holes for the dowels.
And don't forget, the wenge caps that we'll use for the bottom of our legs are slightly larger. So when we put these into our jig, we need to use these spacers that will hold our legs out an extra 1/8 of an inch.
At the drill press, we use the scoring marks as our center and drill a 1/2 inch into the wenge.
Now all of our parts are finished. To make sure that everything goes together just right, we're doing a dry fit. Now here's some tips on doing a large complex glue up like this display stand. First, use a slow setting glue. That'll make sure you have plenty of time to get all the pieces together. And second, it's a good idea to put some masking tape all around the joints, and that'll capture the squeeze out and make the job of cleanup much easier.
We'll begin the glue up with the stand on its side. Apply the glue in the dados only. Set the frames into the dados. Then we apply glue to the dados on the other 2 legs and set them into place. To hold the whole assembly together, we'll wrap it with a band clamp.
For the final stage of our glue up, we stood our assembly upright, and then after we got clamps onto the top and the bottom frame, we were able to remove that band clamp from the center section. Now to further protect our wood from marring, we made up these little corner blocks, and these serve 2 purposes. One, they'll protect the display stand from getting dinged up by the clamps, and then 2, they provide a flat surface for our clamps to grab onto. Now one thing that's really critical is we want to check and make sure that all of our corners come out square. Because we're using a slow setting glue, We've got plenty of time to check the corners and make any adjustments if necessary. Alright, these are looking good. We removed our tape and did some cleanup of the glue. Now we're ready to glue on our wenge caps. We did a little bit of hand sanding in here, and here's some important information to remember. When we get to the top, only glue on 3 of the 4 wenge caps. The 4th one has to be removable, so that later on we can install the glass into our top shelf.
We put the glue in the dowel holes of the caps and the holes in the legs. Then we brush some glue on the end grain. Then we secure the caps, top and bottom, with long clamps. Again, it's a good idea to get in the habit of using cork blocks on the clamps to protect the wood. We'll let the glue cure for a few hours, and then we're ready for our finish.
I'm using one of my favorite finishes, hand-rubbed tung oil. This will really soak deeply into the wood and bring out the rich, natural color of the grain and show a lot of depth and beauty. On a tall piece of furniture like this, I like to start at the bottom and work my way towards the top.
It's a good idea to put on one coat, let it dry, then burnish the surface with some 4/0 steel wool. Wipe it down and apply another coat. You can repeat this 4 to 6 times until you get the finish you want. The understated elegance of this stand, with its strong, simple lines, the warm, rich tones of the contrasting woods, and the pleasing soft edges, make it the ideal platform to display your treasures.
The very last step is to add the glass shelves. We're using 1/4-inch glass with a pencil polished edge. And don't forget to mark your removable cap so that you can easily get the glass in and out. Thanks for watching. I'm David Marks. We'll see you next time on WoodWorks.